Welcome to Capitalizing Your Life, the podcast that shows you how to take control of your money, build lasting wealth, and create financial freedom using the infinite banking concept. If you're ready to make your cash flow work for you instead of someone else, you're in the right place. Here's your host, Glenn Yaney.
Today, my guest is David Hammer with Hammer Success Systems. Welcome, David.
Glenn, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we met through me canceling out on the Nelson Nash Institute conference at the last minute. I had some work issues come up and we got tied in that way and started talking. And, you work with real estate syndicators and stuff like that. And I thought it would be great to have you on the podcast. Really, just if you could, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
And also, I'm also better if you just ask me questions because I can go on for days about
I'd love to hear all.
But so I'm here in central northern New Jersey. I've been here most of my life, except for the 4 years I went to college out in the Midwest, University of Michigan. Came back here and I started my career in the financial services world. And how I initially got into it, it was that I actually had a family member who was working for, which I didn't realize at the time, a family office. And we're talking 35 years ago. So I got an economics background degree, and I ended up working because I've been thinking about this actually the last 6 months, because family office has become also a strategy that a lot of people want to know more about, that I actually worked for a family office without even realizing it when I first got out of college. But to try to make a long story short, I cut my teeth on Wall Street as a trader, and I was actually I was a trader for a very wealthy individual in Manhattan. And then what I discovered was I had a lot of friends who were also on Wall Street, but they were I was on the buy side of Wall Street, where I'm a portfolio manager. But I found over time that a lot of my friends and colleagues that were on what I call the other side of the business, which is the sell side, where they were soliciting and getting clients, business owners and such, they were doing quite well for themselves. So I made a shift about 4 years into my Wall Street career to then become a retail broker. I started out, if anyone on this podcast knows, that companies that people used to work for on Wall Street 35, 40 years ago are no longer in existence. They changed names, they consolidate. So I worked for Shearson Lehman, and basically it was at that point a cold call cowboy mentality where, I literally opened up a yellow pages or a white pages and just started dialing away and letting people know what I know. And that's how I developed my business. And then I worked in retail for the larger firms. And then at some point I ended up going independent for myself about maybe 10 years ago. I had my own practice, clientele, doing AUM business. And Glenn, I'm sure you're going to ask me right away, how did I discover, infinite banking? So during COVID, and Glenn, I'm sure maybe this happened to you as well, and a lot of other people that listen to this podcast, is that there was a sense of what's going to happen here business-wise? Am I going to need to make a shift? I'm not going to be able to see people. We're sheltering in place, and how am I going to continue to be able to see and be able to interact with people in that environment? So, with a lot of time on my hand, I started going down rabbit holes looking at different content online. And I happened to stumble upon somebody's material. It happened to be on LinkedIn of all places. And it was a video that kind of caught my attention. And the person, unbeknownst to me at the time, was actually talking about using this creative way of using cash value life insurance to be able to help people to finance, of all things, real estate. So I made a phone call out to the person. We went back and forth, and that's how I stumbled on infinite banking and IBC and becoming your own banker. And again, this is me having been in the financial services industry for 30 plus years and never have heard about it. And then I happened to find out about it just because I'm wondering which way I should pivot in my business. And this is how I find out about it. So then, I start doing research on it. I find out about the Nelson Nash Institute, and away I went. And now it's been about 7 years, 6.5, 7 years, where I've been actively using the strategies that we learned through, Nelson Nash Institute and such. And that's my origin story about how I, again, having been in this business for as long as I was, just like I'm sure a lot of the public, I was in the business and I didn't know about it. I can only imagine the general public that is not aware of a lot of these financial instruments that they're even less aware of this being a thing.
So what would you say, like, whenever I think of infinite banking concept, I think more of like towards like cash flow assets. You borrow against it and you funnel your money back into the policy.
Right.
Being a stock trader, like, what would you say like the problem was that because to think that you're going to start selling life insurance and practicing infinite banking, generally you have to have a problem before you get into that. Because if you didn't have a problem, there's no solution. So what would you say the problem was for you at the time?
Like for me as a professional, or are you saying like what I saw as problems for the general public that I was speaking to?
Yeah, I would say both. Like, how did it fit where you were like, yes, I'm going to do this?
Well, a couple things. One is I had actually dabbled in some life insurance products because actually before went independent, I did work for Mass Mutual for 7 years.
Hmm.
So I understood that there was a missing piece to my practice when I was consulting and helping people out in their financial matters. There was one very important piece of the puzzle I was always leaving out because what you may or may not know is that on Wall Street, the training that we get, it's always about just gathering assets and helping people, and then you make a small percentage on collecting these assets and putting them into programs like that. But life insurance and protection was always something that we were always told, let someone else do that.
Yeah.
And almost like, don't even bother with it. And almost as though, I'm just going to say it like, it's beneath us on Wall Street to talk about these things. Like we should be talking about the more heady things, which is like getting rates of return and, and being able to help people manage their assets that way. So honestly, Wall Street really did not do the best job of teaching professionals, in my opinion, in general, that probably the most important thing is actually the protection and safety piece,
Yeah.
making sure your loved ones are protected. So that's when I realized that there was a missing part of my practice that led me to be able to practice this.
Yeah. I tell people as they're talking about it, because there's a lot of people that, bring it up like it's like the magic pill. And I'm like, it's a pretty boring asset is what I would say.
Oh yeah.
If you want to talk about what's happening into your bank account, your cash bank account, your savings, maybe compare it to more of like a money market account. Is like, we're talking about like very boring asset, but I would say that as a cash account is by far the best asset I would put my money into. It's definitely what it came down to. But it's like I had this guy, he worked for venture capital funds and stuff like that. And I started talking to him about it. And it was like you couldn't get him to break away from comparing IBC to the S&P 500. And I'm like, well, this is not the same. We're not comparing it to a stock market.
Right.
We're talking about a safety, liquid reserves for opportunities.
Right. Like, so in my presentations, because of my Wall Street background,
Yeah.
I initially approached it as though, I'm always telling people you want a lot of uncorrelated assets in your portfolio. So like you do a lot of real estate.
Yeah.
And people will have real estate, they'll have cryptocurrency, they'll have, stock market related instruments, they'll have currency, they'll have oil and gas. Because at some point there's going to be a distribution stage where you're going to be tapping into these assets and you don't, in my professional opinion, do you want to have enough different assets that you have a choice of where you're pulling from? So I initially approached it from that standpoint until, I got more deeply into what infinite banking means and the concepts. So initially, it was an idea of like, how do I arbitrage, which was a mistake that I rectified over time where, a lot of people thought, oh, I'm getting 4% internally on this policy, but I'm being charged X amount. And where's the arbitrage? And how am I going to arbitrage this for my other activities I'm going to do? And, this is when you have to educate people about it's not about rates of return. It's about volumes of interest. And it's about, you have to pay yourself first. And the banking institutions, and I don't want to get too crazy and not, like this is a system that has been around before even the Federal Reserve was ever created. And the fact of the matter is that it's all about you're paying interest to somebody in some form, way, or fashion. You might as well start with yourself and pay yourself first because you're the most important person to pay all of this. Whether you see it in interest or you like proverbially have it paying interest to people, it all begins and ends with you and your system and where you're storing, again, this very unsexy asset.
Yeah.
I think that's what you were trying to say.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say is that when I tell people, when I show them, initially, I'm saying, we're going to be talking about something that is a very plain vanilla concept, but it's not about that part. It's about what you're going to do once you have your money stored in that plain vanilla asset. You don't want to take your chances and risk with a safe asset. What I do for you is I'll put your money or recommend you have your money somewhere where you'll take your risk outside of this platform that we're creating for you, but do not take it inside of here.
Hey guys, if you'd like to learn more about the infinite banking concept and how to flow your capital through your own financing system, my team and I are here to help. With over 35 years of experience, we can guide you in building a properly structured whole life policy tailored to you and your family. See the scheduling link below. Now, back to the show. You're not going to rely on a properly structured whole life policy to get you to retirement by itself.
Yeah.
It's not going to get you there.
Right.
It's one of those, it's a safe place to hold your capital while you look for other opportunities.
Right.
Yeah, I always think, and I've been talking about this a lot recently, but it's like my mind thinks linear and what's happening is exponential, So like if my cash value when I'm 70 years old is going to be $5 million, I think $5 million is a lot of money. But if you think about inflation and everything that happens, it's like it's going to not be enough. And on top of that, what I'm doing with the cash value outside of the policy is what they call the unseen. And that's what's happening. And to be at 5 million, I think that the assets outside of that policy would probably be close to 20 to 25 million of assets outside the policy. So we have this big cash value on the side, along with the assets that we've been growing with the liquidity of the cash value life insurance.
Yeah.
Cool. So here's something I always think of, and I'm not a big stock guy. I've done it. And I could tell you like all the things you said were like, I had to get to this point of like I would put my money into the stock market short term, and I would think like I'd have $30,000 in there, and then it would turn into like something would happen and I would get nervous, and then I would end up panic selling because I misclassified this capital as long-term money, but really it was short-term money that I was using it for. And I'd end up selling it because of some headline story, and it never really got me what I was expecting out of it, even though sometimes the stock was good or whatever. But we all know that it's like outbeating the S&P 500 is very rare if you're going to do it. Long story short, how would you combine infinite banking with a stock portfolio?
So it's always looking at obviously someone's, their entirety and their investable assets, and then trying to break down exactly what each asset and where your money is, why it's there, and what are the goals for each one of those assets. So for you, you may have been thinking about, because it sounds like real estate is really, that's where inside,
All in.
upside down, sideways.
Yeah.
But when it comes to other assets, unless someone's maybe guiding you, you're probably not going to have a long range view when it comes to other assets, because your long range view is your bread and butter, which is your real estate and the passive income
Yeah.
and the appreciation of that asset. So I would say that, I sit down with somebody and first I ask them, like, where do they have a goal for where they see themselves 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, depending on obviously the age of the person I'm in front of.
Yeah.
And then it'll be I'll backtrack and then figure out percentile, you should have X amount in cash value life insurance, X amount in things that are related to the stock market, and then other X amounts in, depending on what their experience level already is. Like, I'm not going to convince someone like you that you should pare back your real estate portfolio.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to intersperse other assets in the equation, but it's never a tried and true number. But I would say that you should definitely have some in this asset that you and I, are practitioners of. You should have definitely some exposure to the financial markets, because over time, that's an asset that, even with all of the headline news that will make people want to react to it over time, it is a pretty dependable longer term asset to have money in. I don't really do a lot with fixed income these days. If it's that, I'll look at other insurance products like, MIGA's multi-year guaranteed annuities and other things where I'm transferring the risk of future income onto the insurance companies and let them manage that risk, as opposed to my clients trying to manage it or me helping them manage that risk as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's it's kind of like another thing that's been resonating with me is like our own ecosystem. Like we have this, like for me personally, We have right now, currently in our portfolio, we have $70,000 worth of vacancy sitting. So it's kind of like if we just focus on $70,000 of vacancy, we don't technically have to buy any more real estate. We can just fix the $70,000 or get the 70,000 occupied, and you've essentially bought a portfolio that's, $7 to $10 million just by adding that $70,000 worth of revenue to the portfolio. And then the other one comes into play so that, in my opinion, needs CapEx. And then another one would be, and effort, work, focusing on, that. But then the other one would be interest expense. So we pay a lot of high interest. No, it's just because we're buying pretty much rundown mobile home parks. And it's like, that was when I came to the conclusion, like, if I'm spending $200,000 of interest, a month, it's like, how do I recapture this interest? So it's like, not to say I could recapture all of it because I have syndications and stuff, but it's like, this interest is like bleeding out of the system, and all this work and hard, it actually increases the basis of the property. So if I paid $1 million for this property and I'm paying 100,000 of interest every month or every year, then it's 1,100,000 every year that you're not covering that interest, So it's like, how do we improve that system? And that's kind of what I've been really focusing on recently.
And I'm just curious, I'm going to interview you for a minute. Like,
Sure.
how has your infinite banking policy, how is that being able to reverse or be able to arbitrage that interest exposure?
Yeah. So I talk about this once in a while, but when I started my policy, business was good. Then, like, I was funding my policy, everything is good. And I tell the people I work with as well, like, they're always worried about the premium. It's like, that's a lot of premium. And I'm like, I understand. It feels like a lot, but you're kind of looking at it as an expense. But what I did my first year, I put $60,000 into the policy. And then my house got flooded within 3 months of that first policy. And then 2 weeks after that, I had hurricanes come through. The first one was a coastal flooding, which got some of our parks. But the second one was an inland flooding where most of our parks are. And it freaking beat the crap out of me. And I have 2 small parks, a 3 and a 9 unit to make 12 units. But it technically pays all my expenses, but it got pummeled by a hurricane. So I had to renovate a duplex, which is 2 bathrooms, 2 kitchens, And then after that, we had, just expenses that went through the roof because we spent about $400,000 in November after the hurricane. And like, it was like every day there was a electric pole or meter that I had to pay for. And it was like $3,000 every time. So I got pummeled right after I started a policy. And thankfully I had money, cash value in that policy. So I was able to, get through that and personally. And then I actually did have to borrow a little bit of funds for the other portfolios and stuff like that, just to keep them going. And then we started having windfalls after that. We sold some properties. We had, just through owning real estate, windfalls happen. And I was able to fund the next year, like in full. Like, I had no problem with it. But it's like, that's, in my opinion, that's life. And then also what ended up happening is, right now I would say that the cash value that I have is around 92,000, or it's over 100, but I count this certain cash value as 92,000, but the liquid savings in that cash value is around 20,000 because I still had to draw it down to fix up properties. We bought a lot of properties. We had 100,000 of vacancy. We were evicting 30 people a month for 6 months. It was like mass mayhem in our portfolio. So it's like, all these things happen. I believe it's part of investing, part of entrepreneurship. But I would say the only thing that was consistent was my infinite banking policy. And I knew exactly what was happening with it. It wasn't any different. It's still there. You have to figure out what happens in life. But I could tell you that through time, it will definitely recapture some interest. But at the same time, I was able to hold on to assets that I would have maybe lost if I didn't have the capital available.
Right. So like, this is what I was talking about before about how when you have uncorrelated assets, so this gave you a choice at the time where you didn't have to liquidate an asset maybe unceremoniously at a time when it wasn't opportune, whether it be real estate or something in the stock market or wherever else you may need to raise capital. You were able to raise it.
Yep.
And be able to, at the same time, the greatest invention is uninterrupted compound growth.
Yep.
So, that's why, but people don't realize how important it is until they're smacked in the face with
Yep.
the choice that they have to make at a very inopportune moment, which is going to come at some point. And so knowing that you have this safety valve of cash value that you could pull from and still not disrupt that system, I think is comforting for business owners, not just people in real estate, but you saw it firsthand.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's just one of those things where obviously my business is risky. It's relying on me. And to have a balance in my business, I have to have something very secured on the other side. you know, it's like you have to have the liquidity. The guys that are in real estate that are long term value liquidity. And I can tell you that there's lots of guys that I've seen, and it could have easily been me, is I've seen that they're in real estate and then they're no longer in real estate. And I think you have to look at long term, like how do you hold on to assets? The other thing, this is the thing I was thinking of, is I've been listening to a lot of Charlie Munger speeches and stuff like that. And he's actually very anti-debt. And he talks about being liquid and being against having too much debt, because those are the times when you're selling is when you're a forced seller. You're losing assets. You're selling for a discount. I would say in this time of the market, it's not exactly the strongest market. I mean, you can still sell at this time and make good money, but I would say that, in a year or two from now, I would think it might be in a better position to be a seller. So that's the main thing. It's just like you have to have staying power to not be forced into selling good assets at a bad time.
Didn't Charlie Munger, I thought I saw some of his material lately where something about don't take on any debt after age 60, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was him, right?
Yeah, I mean, I listen to these things. It's more of like, I think it's reading his books, but I call it AI Charlie. So I don't know if it's got Charlie Munger's voice, but I think it's reading his books. So anyways, I've been listening to it, and it literally is very profound. I would say anybody should be listening to it. And I have friends that I send it to, like, hey, this is AI. And I'm like, I know, but it's still Charlie Munger. It's everything he's taught and all the things he said. But I would say that he's like, he says even housing debt, because the one thing he says about the housing is like, it's okay if you buy a house with debt. He's like, but the problem is we make more money and we have to buy a bigger house for whatever reason. We have to continuously keep up buying. Like, if you're making $1 million, you need to be in a way bigger house than you're already in. Like that's what his thing is. Like, you have to find the enough in your life to really grow assets, is what he's saying. He's like, if you don't have enough in your life, you won't ever be rich, ever. That's the one thing I get from listening to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he learned from the best. He learned from Mr. Warren Buffett. So,
Yeah.
and I know that, by the way, I don't know, like I would suggest anyone, that listens to the podcast. I think when I was on Wall Street, the one I would say almost required reading was to read an annual report from Berkshire Hathaway, because you got a full financial education just looking at all the things that Warren Buffett and even Charlie, what they were synthesizing at that given time. And you'll get even better education than anything you'll get on any social media or news agencies and such. Like, just like listen to what they have to say.
It's so easy to read too. It's like, it's not complicated. You read it and it's like the vocabulary isn't like, it's very easy to comprehend.
Yeah, like his Midwest sort of mentality is simplicity of viewing things in a certain way. And I think I don't know, I'd speak for myself, will tend to complicate things because we think we need to complicate them, because that'll create a competitive advantage that you're reading into or analyzing. And I think Warren Buffett just did everything the same way and viewed, if he saw value, he viewed it a particular way and obviously stood the test of time. Just like, honestly, what we do here with infinite banking, where, like I always tell people, this type of strategy, this system has stood the test of time. It has withstood 2 world wars, either 19 or 20 recessions, since 1930, one Great Depression, the dot-com bubble back in 2000, the credit crisis back in the 2000s, every single calamity financially, this system or this way of putting your money and storing it and then leveraging it has stood the test of all of these financial schisms that have taken place over the last 100 years. And that's what gives me solace to be able to continue to, go back and continue to educate people about it.
The one thing also with IBC and Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, is I think the things that they do is, and it's like people always talk about how much cash reserves they have. And it's like, it's because you don't have to chase returns. it's like when the time is right and the investment is there, it's like it doesn't even have to you don't have to pull out an Excel spreadsheet. You can literally get out maybe a napkin, maybe a calculator, and just say, let me see here. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So what I would say is, with the syndications and always feeling like your money has to be working for you, I think having that, I know there was a time when if I had $100,000, I would have became financially independent immediately for buying a property that was like a mobile home park on a great corner in the middle of a great section of town. And all I had to do is have 100,000. I didn't have it. And I had saved up 100,000. I put it all into these other places, 401ks and all this other stuff. And I just didn't have the capital. So what I'm saying is that it's like we're constantly taught to chase returns, but really having that liquid available capital is what keeps us around, for one, to survive, but also to be able to take advantage of those bigger swings when we're constantly trying to figure out how to get 10 to 12%, when there's certain areas in my life, if I were just to have the capital, it could be way better returns,
Right. And you also don't want to be in a position where you have to go to somebody else to
Exactly.
be able to capitalize, whether it be go to a bank or whatever resources your audience goes to.
Yeah.
You want that to be your capital.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, David, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Where can people find you?
You can go to my website, which is, I'll give you, I don't know if you posted on the,
Sure.
will be a link below. And then you can see me on all social media platforms. I'm just looking at my phone while you're asking me this question. Look for me at Hammer D, and on, let me see, Instagram. You just go to my website, which is the hammersuccesssystem.com. But you'll have a link below. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for listening to the Capitalizing Your Life podcast. Please rate, subscribe, leave a comment, and share with someone who you think would enjoy listening.